Thank you so much for streaming our latest message from First Baptist Church. Here at FBC, our mission is to lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. We do that by thinking big, thinking small, thinking in, and thinking out. We hope that this message helps you as you continue to grow in your faith. If you would like to stay connected to FBC, you can visit our website at fbcloyd.ca, look us up on Facebook and Instagram, or download our free mobile app. Now here's the latest from FBC. Enjoy.
You guys can grab a seat. What an awesome morning. A little bit of an intense and overwhelming morning, kind of being on double duty, music and singing. I thought our church was desperate when music and speaking. I thought our church was desperate when they put me up here to speak or to play music, but now they got me doing both, so we're in pretty bad shape, I guess. Anyways, I'm really pumped to be back up here. It's been a little over a month since I've been up here speaking to you guys. For those of you who don't know, my wife Talcy and I, we went to Rwanda for a couple weeks, which is a country in Africa, if you don't know where that is. And it was awesome. And I have lots of stories. I'm not going to give you guys like a full rundown of our trip now, or maybe even ever. I'm sure you'll hear some of my stories. The one thing I do really want to say that's kind of like on my heart while I was there, I kind of forget, but every time I go somewhere like Africa or a developing nation or something like that, it's always so mind-blowing to me how much it makes me realize how much bigger the world is than this like little bubble that I live here in Western Canada. I think it's really easy to just, view the world through our lens and think that this is reality and normal for most people, but this really isn't reality or normal for most people around the world. And whenever I travel and, get immersed in another culture, I just realize, man, this world is so big and what God is doing is so big. So my quick plug this morning, and I was kind of thinking about it a lot while I was in Rwanda, I was kind of just like, man, I wish I could have taken all of FBC with me. If you've never been somewhere like that and gone to be immersed in the culture, I know there are a lot of excuses and reasons to not do it, but I would challenge you to do it sometime and just marvel in how big of a planet this is and how amazing God is and what he's doing and how incredible that is. And so anyways, that's my plug. You should go. If you ever want someone to go with, I'd be happy to go back to Africa with you. I love it there. It's so awesome. I never wear shoes ever. While I see posts here with snow where I'd have to be wearing shoes. So it's like my favorite place. Contrary to a lot of what a lot of people who've never been to Africa think, there is internet in Africa, so I was able to keep up with the series. Now, I will be honest and say our Wi-Fi was pretty bad, so I couldn't watch the series while Doug was speaking, but I was listening to the podcast. And I first of all, I just kind of want to say, I'm really sorry that I left you guys here to have the talk with Doug. Listen to Doug talk about sex. That is really awkward and uncomfortable. Even through a podcast, that's awkward and uncomfortable, so I'm really sorry. I think my favorite part of listening to that week's podcast, though, is Doug gets up here, he's making small talk. I don't know if you were there, it was during second service, and he's getting up and he's making small talk, and he's saying, talking about some different things. He's like, is there anything else you want to talk about? And my favorite moment is, if you haven't listened, if you were here, if you weren't here, listen to the recording, but all of a sudden I just hear this lady yell, sex! And I'm just like, so I messaged Doug, I'm like, who was that? And it turns out it was Julia, one of our keyboard players, and so, keep your kids away from her. She's crazy. Gonna have a bit of some therapy with her. Just kidding. Really awesome. One last thing I'll say really quickly too is I was talking to Doug's mom right when I got back, and I just said, she was asking me how the trip was. I said it was awesome, and I just said I also love going away for a few weeks because then you guys get to listen to Doug preach for a few weeks on end, and I feel like that gives you a really good opportunity to just appreciate me even more. Kind of an absence makes the heart grow fonder kind of thing. So, I'm happy to be here. I actually, all joking aside, I've spent most of my life going to church, and I think a lot of times, and I think it's kind of normal where you go to church and hear some stuff and you might agree, maybe sometimes you disagree with some stuff, but a lot of times probably if you're going to church a lot, it's things you kind of generally agree with, but it's not like you always leave church just being like, wow, that's like, I need to change everything in my life, going home, everything's different. Hopefully it's encouraging and it's creating life change over time, but it's not always that you have those Sundays. Sometimes it happens, or those moments in your faith where there's something that you really feel just challenging and pushing you to another level. But this series for me has actually been really kind of out of the ordinary and kind of surprised me, just been really pushing me and challenging me in the ways that I approach my marriage. and especially in conjunction with the Grip 2.0 journals. I hope you're doing those. Right now, it's a bunch of just different weeks of passages on marriage. And in the Genesis 2 passage, which was interesting because it's a narrative, so it's kind of arguably harder to journal on in the Grip format, it was really neat for me, especially the prayer section of it, just being challenged to view marriage as kind of this joining of two fleshes where, Talisi really is a part of me and I need to appreciate her more and kind of up my game as a husband. And so, anyways, I've really actually been enjoying this series. It's been awesome listening to Doug. I hope you guys have been enjoying it in your small groups as listen to Kyle Idleman. For some people, maybe you come to a church like this and we say we're going to do a series on marriage, and maybe you're like, why a series on marriage? Like, why are we going to do that? And I'll be honest, there's part of me that kind of feels like that too. When we get together as a staff and we plan out topics and series and stuff like that, I'll be really honest, we talk about doing series about like family and parenting and marriage. It isn't really just like inherently my jam. Like it doesn't like jump out at me. I'm not like, oh yeah. In fact, what I do is I say, that's a really good idea. I'm gonna book a trip to Africa for a couple weeks and Doug's gonna talk about that. It's interesting, we were talking about this at staff planning actually last week, and Darren was kind of like, challenging me on that. He's like, well, why not? He's like, what do you like to talk about? And I was like, like sin, idolatry, immorality, suffering in the Christian faith. And I realized, man, like, I'm a real Debbie Downer. It's a good thing that I don't pick all of our series. That being said, although it's maybe not naturally what I want to speak about, maybe it's also not naturally what a lot of people want to listen to, because there are probably two major camps. There are probably people who their marriage is going really well, and we say we're going to do a marriage on series and a series on marriage, and we're hopefully going to be encouraging your relationships. And maybe your marriage is going really well, and you're like, I don't really need that. Things are good. Or else maybe things are going really horribly, and you're like, I'll skip those weeks because it's frustrating to hear that. It's frustrating to hear people talk about how you should have a strong, good, healthy marriage. And there probably aren't a lot of people right in that kind of perfect middle where they're just starting to face some struggles where they're like, I need this. But we believe, and even though it's not my most natural topic to want to talk about, we believe it's so important to talk about. We're passionate about talking about this. And that's because we believe it's one of the most vital relationships on the planet. We believe that relationship with Jesus is the most important relationship. But after that, marriage is huge. Marriage is like, it's the reason that like we exist. God made humans and then made marriage, and then more humans started existing because of this thing called marriage, Like all of a sudden, magically, we don't know how storks started showing up because people are getting married, and, there are more people, and I'm here because of that. I don't like to think about that, but, that's where I came from. And whether you're married or unmarried, we believe that this is so relevant because marriages impact all of us. And we believe that we really have to talk about it because we believe that our marriages and families are constantly under attack. The Bible talks about this enemy. It calls him the devil or Satan. In John 10:10, Jesus gives this really well-known description of him. He calls him a thief that says that he's come to devour, kill, destroy, steal from you. He's talking about this enemy that hates you. Like he literally, his whole existence is wrapped up in hating you and trying to destroy you. And what better way could he destroy you and destroy us as a church than by trying to take our marriages and our family relationships out of line? And one of the things that's kind of been most mind-blowing in my life is seeing some of the relationships that have fallen apart. I mean, I think we've all seen people who are, in relationships and they start having struggles. You kind of see it coming and you're like, they're having troubles, they're falling apart. But then maybe, I have for sure, but maybe you have seen relationships where all of a sudden they're like, we're struggling or we're getting a divorce. And you're just like, what? Like this is, I know people who like, to me, are like spiritual mentors or way beyond where I'm at, way more mature than where I'm at, which probably isn't saying that much, but really strong, healthy relationship where you're like, I would model mine after that. And all of a sudden they're falling apart. And I have to step back and say, man, if I think I'm invincible to these kinds of attacks, I'm crazy. Some of the people's marriages who I've seen fall apart and continue to see fall apart proves one thing, is that's that the devil is always waiting around the corner, ready to attack, ready to find us in a vulnerable moment. So we need to be talking about this. We need to strengthen our marriages. We need to be prepared for these attacks. We need to rebuild. Maybe you're going through the attacks, maybe even losing to the attacks. Maybe you have lost to the attacks. We need to rebuild. We need to reconcile. We believe in that. And one thing I want to say, if you have a broken marriage or have had a broken marriage or something like that, none of this is stuff that we want to talk about to make you feel frustrated or condemned. We want to encourage you from this point forward to find ways to rebuild, reconcile, and move forward and find health in this area of your life. So for the first 2 weeks, Doug talked about desire and intimacy, and kind of like those initial sparks of how a relationship starts, that love, that desire. He talked about that moment where, you find that person that's like so attractive and you're drawn to them, or like in Fran's case where she found Doug. But for most of us, we find it really attractive. I'm just kidding. Doug's pretty cute, for all the times I make fun of him. But you find someone so attractive and you're drawn to them, and this starts this thing off. But then the next 2 weeks, Doug kind of takes a turn from this kind of thing, and 1 week, because he combined 2 weeks into one, he starts talking about fighting fair and how there are fights in relationships. And it's like, well, how do we go from desire to fighting? I thought we were in love. I thought we liked each other. I thought we were, all lovey-dovey and stuff like that. And then rebuilding romance and starts looking at the issues and the struggles that come in marriage. And we don't talk about the issues and the struggles to be negative. We talk about that so that we can be preemptive in approaching the things that we're going to face inevitably in our marriages. And we believe that building a long-lasting relationship comes down to one thing. We believe that if you build a relationship on emotions and feelings, like that's how it starts, but if you build it on that, that's your foundation, and that's your life plan, is that your relationship will last based on emotions and feelings, then I would basically guarantee you that your relationship one day is going to fail and fall apart. If your game plan is emotions and feelings, one day it's going to be over. I would bet every penny I own, which is actually zero now, but I would bet all the money I own that a relationship based on emotions and feelings is destined to fail. We believe it comes down to one thing, and that's commitment. Now, I will say, obviously we believe everything is all about Jesus, but pragmatically, as a follower of Jesus, what happens when you have a relationship is it comes down to this one thing. It comes down to how much you commit. It has to move beyond feelings. It has to go into commitment. And that's what we're going to talk about this morning. It's just this idea of cultivating undying, unending commitment. But I'm going to just pray really quickly, and then we'll dive into some of this. God, thank you so much that you love us and that you are concerned about our lives and our relationships and our marriages. Whatever I say this morning, I pray that really you would just speak, God, and that you would continue to challenge and shape our lives, that you would use the Bible passages that we use this morning to just continue to encourage us to be a church that's focused on growing and cultivating healthy relationships and marriages and families, God. We love you so much. Amen. Okay, so most of my favorite activities in life are activities that for several days afterwards, I have a whole bunch of physical pain to remind me that I took part in that activity. Okay, so what I mean is, like last year, I talked to you guys about how I did this Tough Mudder run. It was 16 kilometers through the mud, all these like crazy obstacles, like getting electrocuted and stuff like that. And that was on Saturday. By like Tuesday, I wake up in the morning, I feel like I'm dying and my back is broken. I'm just like, oh yeah, I did Tough Mudder, And it's the reminder, it's so awesome. And one of my favorite activities when I was young, and I still love it now, is tubing behind a boat. And this is definitely one of those activities where days later you're like, yeah, I tubed, For me, I love wild tube rides. When I was young, my dad had a boat, and is also different too. When I was young, now the tubes are basically the size of the boat, and you put 10 kids on the same tube. If you're my age, you remember that the tubes were all a single kind of donut shaped thing. You could put your butt in it, or some little kids would kneel in it and get a shin massage the whole time. But anyways, it was these, and so we'd put multiples of them. It was way better because the chances of getting injured were way higher, because not only could someone hit you with their body, but they could come flying from 20 feet away and hit you with their body. And so it was a lot more exciting. So I feel sorry for kids nowadays because they don't get to experience that. But so my dad's boat, we'd usually put 4 tubes. And when we were really young, started out with pretty boring, lame tube rides. You guys have been on a tube ride with a little kid and you're just this is so lame. You can basically lay there without holding on, nothing happens. But as we got older, we wanted it to be crazier and crazier and crazier, and it became this big competition. A competition with my dad. It's Dad, but you can't knock us off this time. And he would go into try to kill us mode. And I noticed that he seemed to try to kill people more often when I was on the tube than when my sister was. So I think he was trying to thin the herd a little bit. But he would try to knock us off. But then also with our friends, what we started to realize was we realized, like when we were young, if your tube would flip over, you fall off, right? But we realized just because your tube flips over or just because you fly off the back doesn't mean you have to fall off. Because you can hold on to that tube hard enough that you can go into like submarine mode and be underneath the tube and you can stay on, right? And so we get really competitive with our friends, like who can stay on the longest, who can stay on the craziest waves and stuff like that. And there were really only two reasons once we started getting really hardcore about it that you would fall off. One was that like your arms got so tired that you just couldn't drag in the water anymore. We'd be hanging onto the little like tube cover on the back, dragging in the water, and you got to the point where you're like, my arms just are about to break. I can't go on anymore. Or else there's those moments, and maybe somebody can relate to this, where you didn't cinch your shorts up quite tight enough. You've been dragging for a while, and they're around your ankles. I'm like screaming at my sister. I'm like, Angel, don't look. I'm trying to stay on. But you're like, man, like I'm an inch away from just being out here naked in the middle of the lake, right? So that was time to let go. But we realized that even though the tube rides got crazier and there were more waves and my dad was really trying to kill his own children, that if you held on tight enough, you could ultimately stay on through pretty much anything. Kyle Eidelman gives us, we've been using these message guides that he's been using, and he gives us an analogy in his where he talks about how he signed up to run a marathon back in the day. And what happened was he signed up and he was all excited. He's like, I'm going to train. He made this commitment to train, so he's ready to run this marathon. So he starts training, but then he gets bored of training because training's boring and running by yourself is boring. And so then he starts like slacking off and he's saying, tomorrow I'll run long distances, tomorrow. He keeps putting it off and he's like, I'll do this later. And so the story goes that he gets to the day of the marathon and he walks most of the marathon. He completes it, but he says he walked most of it. He was miserable and he totally failed. And the reason was because he had made a promise, a commitment at the start to train, but he eventually gave up because it got difficult. See, this morning what we're going to be talking about is kind of the idea of, we're going to work through a little bit of some of the lines from traditional wedding vows that people take, and we're going to be looking at the idea of what kind of commitment those call us to, and how easy it is to give up on our commitment, but how important it is to hold to our commitment. So most people do wedding vows at their weddings. Talcy and I had a fairly non-traditional wedding. We still did wedding vows. We wrote our own wedding vows, and some of you maybe did, but really ultimately, we thought it was cool to write our own vows. Really, ultimately, they say the same thing as like any other vows, right? It's like, till death do us part, we're going to stay together, no matter if things are good or bad. And so we're going to look at a few lines from that. They're in your bulletin if you want to jot any notes down or anything like that. But these vows that people make at their wedding are like the ultimate sign of commitment at the wedding. Like lots of cool stuff going on, but this is where they get in front of each other and they say, I promise, like till the day I die or you die or whatever, and then it's like a competition who can outlive each other, but it's like until one of us dies, we're together, I'm in. And I think this is such a parallel to our relationship with Jesus. When you decide to follow Jesus, you become a Christian, what doesn't happen is you don't just wake up the next day and you're like, man, I just had this thought. I'm going to think big, think small, think in, think out. I'm just going to be a follower of Jesus, read my Bible every day, pray, give lots, like all these things that Christians do. It's hard. You have to be committed to grow in your relationship with Jesus. It's the same way in your marital relationships. Really, wedding day, we're making all these vows, but it's really saying, I'm going to commit for the long haul. Hebrews 12:1 kind of looks at it like this. It says, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. So it says, stuff's going to distract you. So throw it off, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. And then this passage goes on to talk about how Jesus endured so much and persevered to show his commitment to us, because his relationship with us is for sure based on commitment. If it was based on how we made him feel, then I would guess that I'd be pretty hooped in that relationship. But he's so committed that he endures anything for us, and he calls us to be the same. A lot of parallels. You can find lots of parallels to this passage in 1 Corinthians 9, Hebrews 10, 2 Timothy 4, and all throughout. And what the Bible is ultimately saying is committed lifelong relationships, whether it's with God or a human being, are hard. It's difficult to stay committed for the long haul. It's difficult to say till death do us part and mean it. Because storms are going to come. The waves are going to get bigger. Your dad's going to whip you harder on the tubes than you've ever been whipped before. And how tightly you hold on is going to determine the outcome of that relationship. And the reality is, in marriage, we're called to hold on so tightly that it doesn't matter what's going on. It doesn't matter how big the waves are. It doesn't matter if your shorts are around your ankles. And that's not a weird wedding analogy, but it doesn't matter what's going on, we're called to hold on to that tube tightly for the long haul. Okay, so the first line from the wedding vows we're going to look at is for better or for worse. So you're saying, till death do us part, I'm going to hold this person for better or for worse. I've never been to a wedding where like the groom gets up and he's like, hey, you know what? I'm going to hold on to you. Like if things are easy and simple and really good, the way I want them to be, the way it looks like in like The Notebook or some other cheesy movie about love. You know, as long as it's like that, till death do us part, I'm in. I mean, if I went to a wedding like that, I would just walk up to the groom, politely punch him in the throat, and save the bride the trouble of marrying this guy. That'd be crazy. No one would ever hear that. No one's ever heard that at a wedding. But the thing is, on your wedding day, when you say for better or for worse, most people think, well, how bad could worse really be? How bad could that really be? I mean, you know, we say it, but it's like, how bad could that get? And what I would say is if you haven't been married for very long, or you're planning on getting married, or one day or sometime soon, ask someone who's been married for a long time how bad that worst can be. And that's not a negative blow on marriage is awesome, but the worst can get pretty bad. The worst can get pretty rough. I've been married for 6.5 years. It's been awesome, but there have been some worse spots than others, and it's difficult sometimes. It's easy to be committed when things are good and better. That's not actually really even commitment at all. It's when things are worse that commitment starts to wane. So this is how I see this play out in our world, okay? So the Blue Jays in 1992, 1993, the Joe Carter era, they won the world, the champion. Yeah, sports, you know. I Googled it and I knew what I was talking about before. The World Series, okay? Come on, I'm sports guru, I know it's good. So anyways, 92, 93, I remember those days, Joe Carter, it was awesome. We all were like, this is so cool. Then what happens? They go like into this 22-year drought of like not mattering, okay? And there are still the hardcore fans who like them and wear their merch. But in 2015, they actually start to have a chance and start doing better. And what happens? People all across Canada are like, oh yeah, Canada's baseball team, you know, wearing hats. You see, like, you guys have noticed in the past couple of years, people are wearing Blue Jays merch. Why? Because things are for the better. But if they start going into a drought again, you're going to start showing up to the interval home and seeing those same shirts and hats being sold. I'm not kidding. Like, no one actually cares about the Blue Jays when they're not doing well, except for the hardcores. It's kind of like, maybe even better example of this kind of commitment is Oilers fans, right? Like Oilers fans have been wearing their jerseys and shirts for decades, knowing that there's no chance that they could ever win the Stanley Cup, right? But they're committed. They say, you know, for worse or for worse, we're in, you know? But that's a real picture of what commitment should look like in our marriages. And the problem is when things get bad, it starts to lead to a grass is greener on the other side kind of mentality. You know, people start cheering for other sports teams or whatever. In your marriage, you start to look at things that your marriage is lacking and start to see where those other things might exist, where you see those things that you wish existed in your marriage. And I think that there are 3 big things that happen when you think that the grass is greener. When you think that the grass is greener, you start to look for joy outside of your marriage. You say, he or she isn't making me happy. So rather than approaching that head on and saying, hey, we need to sit down and figure out how we can make each other happy again, I'm going to start looking for things that make me happy outside of our marriage. When you think the grass is greener, you start to look for pleasure and fun outside of your marriage, saying this isn't fun anymore. So you start to replace your time with your spouse, with your family, with things that will bring you fun and enjoyment. And you start to look for sex outside of your marriage when you think the grass is greener. And hear me out, I'm not just talking about going out and having an affair and sleeping with someone. I think that this is way broader than that. Maybe your husband or your wife doesn't listen to you the way that you wish they should, or doesn't really understand or care about some of those things. And so you start to find some people that you think kind of listen to you or seem to care a little bit more, show you the attention that you wish he did. You know, this guy at work, he shows that attention that you wish your husband did. Now, hear me out. I think it's great for married people to have friendships with people of the opposite gender until you start to see things in them that you wish that you've found in your spouse, and you start being drawn to those things. And then I think you're looking for sex outside of your own marriage. Most people aren't like, hey, I'm a little unhappy in my marriage today, I'm going to go have an affair. What happens is they say, you know, they're struggling a little bit, so they start to find like little glimpses of other things. You know, maybe it isn't just another person. Maybe it's pornography. And again, maybe not just flat out pornography. Maybe it's following some Instagram accounts that you shouldn't with some sketchy stuff, or looking at some things online that, you know, it's not not straight up pornography, but maybe it's fulfilling some of that desire that you aren't finding fulfilled in your marriage. And rather than trying to address the problem, you're looking there. Or maybe it's just like movies or romance novels about love. The pictures of love and the ideas of love that you wish existed in your relationship. You start reading about them and you find kind of those desires filled. Like, just burn that stuff. That stuff those are the entry points for an affair and a broken marriage. Remember in our 1 Peter series, 1 Peter 5:7, Peter says, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. God cares about you. Cast all of your anxiety on him. When things are worse, cast those cares on him because he cares for you and he will lift you up in those times of trouble. When things are going bad, when things are for the worse, that doesn't mean your marriage is crumbling or falling apart. What it means is that you're a human being and you married another human being, which is a good thing. It means that you're going to face some struggles. You know, things will be better. And in those better times, you enjoy those, you embrace those, and you thank God for those. But in those worst times, when things are worse, that's an opportunity to grow. That's an opportunity to actually strengthen your marriage and bolster it for the times that things are better. And that's actually when things are worse, is when your true colors start to show. Ask Taliesin. I give her lots of opportunities to show her true colors because I'm really good at making things for the worse. She's the for the better part. And that's my contribution to our marriage, is helping her grow by adversity. Embrace those moments for the worse. Don't give up on those. God cares about you, and he wants to walk through that with you. The next line in wedding vows says, for rich or for poor. This one's a little bit different. I think that people often think that those lines parallel each other, for better or for worse, and for richer or poorer. And they think for better is like for richer, and for worse is like for poorer. But I actually think that for better and for worse, you have problems when things are worse. But in this, you can have problems no matter how much money you have or don't have. I've seen successful marriages with no money, unsuccessful marriages with no money, poor people. I've seen really wealthy people with successful marriages and unsuccessful marriages. This causes an issue on both ends of the spectrum and anywhere in between. And the main reason for this is because in the same way that we struggle to surrender our lives to God and fully entrust them into his hands, in the same way that we struggle to surrender our marriages and entrust them into his hands, as humans, we struggle so much to take our finances and just let go of them and just surrender them and entrust them into God's hand. And as long as you hold on to them like that, for richer or for poor, it doesn't matter. They're going to cause problems in your relationship. In Philippians chapter 4, Paul is thanking the Philippians because they've been supporting his ministry. They've been sending him money, and he's thanking them. He's like, thank you for your generous gifts. And this is what he says in Philippians 4:19. He says, my God will meet all your needs according to the riches of his glory in Christ Jesus. Paul's been saying, thank you so much that you're generous, that you've surrendered your money to God, that you give and give and give. But it's interesting, if you read Philippians 3 and 4, this thank you that Paul gives them for their support sounds more like a you're welcome for letting you support me, which sounds really weird when you read it. But what Paul is saying is he's saying, you know what, I'm thankful that you're contributing your money to me, but let me tell you, because you're giving, God is going to bless you so much. God, like he says, he will meet all your needs according to the riches of his glory in Jesus Christ. He says, you know what, because you give, because you're generous, because you've surrendered yourselves to Jesus, you're going to see him show up in big ways in your life. So it's good for you that you've had this opportunity to give. And again, hear me clear, this doesn't mean you'll be rich, but the more you entrust and surrender your life into God's hands, like 1 Peter 5, the more he can care for you and take care of you and provide for you, the more you'll see him work in and through your life. Finances can become so central in our lives when we don't surrender them, and they become the focus, and they drive the ways that we act, the ways that we feel, the ways that we spend, the ways that we respond, the ways that we feel emotionally. Maybe you sometimes see that your emotions are impacted by your what's going on financially in your life. And they impact the ways that you organize and prioritize your lives. The decisions you make in life are driven by your finances. And the Bible has a word that encompasses this, and that word is idolatry. And the Bible handles that as a really serious offense. Idolatry is a big negative thing in the Bible. But when you take something like money and you let it take precedence over God and you let it drive your decisions and you let it drive who you are and form who you are, the Bible calls it idolatry. And I think there are a lot of things, but I've made a little list of things that happen when money becomes an idol. When money becomes an idol, it makes work a priority over family. It makes you a slave. When money becomes an idol, you can never get enough and you will never be content. When money becomes an idol, it makes your marriage miserable. And when money becomes an idol, it doesn't leave much room for God. And this is huge. You guys heard that passage Barry was sharing from 1 John 4. It says that God is love. So God's the author and creator of everything. God created you, he created marriage, he created family, he created love. But the Bible actually describes him as the essence of love. And if you've set up your marriage in a way where you don't have much room for God, the actual essence of love in your relationship, then you are trading in your marriage for what? For finances. I mean, you're hooped if you don't leave room for God in your marriage. We would say that the real point in life is to know God, not to be married. So having God in your marriage should be far prioritized over anything else. And I believe that one of the best ways you can approach this commitment, for richer or for poorer, is simply to just give more. The more generous you are, the more you'll surrender this area of your life to God, and it will be easier to be committed in this area, and you'll be more successful at being committed in this. And maybe you hear this and you think, I don't understand like how poor you are, your financial situation, or what's going on, or the struggles you're facing. Yeah, I've never walked a day in your shoes. But let me tell you, I've been in a place where I've been low income. When I married Talcy, I was like low income, and she had a small income, and I was kind of like I won the lottery because it's like, sweet, I just married a girl who has cash flow. But right before we got married, I was low income. She decided to go into YWAM and do Bible college, which is awesome. But man, we're just shelling out money for this stuff. And we were faced with this decision where, do we pull back on our spending, or do we trust God and surrender this area of our lives to him? And so we decided, no, we have to give. We have to prioritize surrender in this area of our life. We have to prioritize following Jesus in his example of generosity over worrying about our own money. And one of the areas that I've seen our marriage grow and our lives grow and be blessed the most is just in the opportunities that we've had to give. I'm not saying we're the most generous people in the world, but in the times that we've been able to give and grow in our giving and give more are some of the coolest times that I've experienced God and seen his love actually show up in our lives and in our marriage. Maybe you're like, Ryan, I already give lots. My challenge, give more. Give more. Make it your life challenge to outgive God. It'll be a really fun game that you will never win. Give more. As long as you view it as your marriage and your finances, you can't expect God to show up and take care of you in your marriage and your finances. As long as you think it's yours and you hold on to it, you can't expect God to take control of that and care for you in that. And the last vow we'll look at is in sickness and health. Life and love are really easy when there are no obstacles or challenge. And when you're young or something, you get married and you don't really think about like this vow. It doesn't really, even to me still, it doesn't mean that much because it's like in sickness and health, like how, like, generally pretty healthy. So you don't think about it that much. But the interesting thing that I've been thinking about is when you sign up to get married, you're marrying someone who is currently in the process of dying, of becoming dead. And that sounds really like, I hope I didn't just like ruin any engaged couples' chances here. But when you marry someone, that's someone who's currently dying and getting step by step closer to death. And what you're saying is until your very last breath, or if I'm lucky until my last breath so I don't have to watch you die, I'm going to be there holding your hand and riding this out with you, no matter how sick because everybody is dying until their very last disease takes them. And the commitment till death do us part is saying, no matter how sick you get, no matter where this takes you, I'm there holding your hand. I'm there with you. I'm there serving you. I'm there committed, serving you even when you can't return the favor to me. And it's kind of a crazy thing to think about. It's a big commitment. And I think 3 big things happen when health turns to sickness. When health turns to sickness, it challenges your willingness to serve. It says, how willing are you really to serve in a way that you're not going to get that reciprocated? How willing are you to just serve in a way that they can't really pay that back from a sick bed? It challenges your humility. How big of a mess are you really willing to clean up? What emotional challenges attached to health challenges are you willing to humbly embrace and stay committed through? And it challenges your commitment. It's easy to think that this isn't what you signed up for. Like when you get married and then you face some obstacles down the road to say, hey, this isn't what I signed up for, but it's exactly what you signed up for. I hate it when my vehicle breaks down. I don't know anything about vehicles. I hate standing in the mechanic shop and them telling me about parts of the vehicle I've never heard of in my life that cost thousands and thousands of dollars and why I won't be able to drive my vehicle for the next week. I hate that. When I bought it brand new, I wasn't thinking like, I wasn't thinking ahead to when I'm going to be in the mechanic shop paying like ridiculous amounts of money to fix this thing. It's not what you think about on your wedding day, but it's the reality of being in a marriage relationship. Humans are fragile. They struggle with sin. They struggle with sickness. And ultimately, they're a dying being that you are signing up to exist with till the very end, until death do you part. It can actually be a good competition to see who can outlast the other one, right? And then I can serve you in sickness more than you can serve me in sickness, right? I'm going to outlive Tallahassee, so I've already decided I'm winning that challenge. These are my main points. I want to conclude with a little bit of a couple passages of scripture. In this week's outline, Kyle Idleman didn't have anything from the Song of Solomon, so I want to look at that book a little bit. But first of all, I just want to say this is a crazy book of the Bible. I don't know if you've read through it. Usually when I read through it, I finish it, and I'm just sitting there, I'm like, what? So I read it again, I'm like, no, but still, what? Like, this is crazy. I think about it this way. If I was Solomon, and I decided I'm going to write a book about Talahassee's and my sex life, where I make all kinds of crazy statements, including referring to her breasts as twin fawns, and then say millions of people are going to read this over thousands of years, Tallahassee would murder me. Like, till death do us part would be the moment I started writing that book. But I love the rawness of this book. In the middle of a book that's full of scripture that has all these amazing teachings, it's just this book that's so real. It's just about, like, life. As Christians, I think a lot of times we skirt around controversial or difficult or edgy topics. And I think as a church and as followers of Jesus, we should be the first ones that want to talk about this. Say, that's real life. It's raw. It's gross. It's real. Whatever it is. We want to be in the mix on that. And that's one of the reasons we're really excited to do this You Asked For It series, because we're just saying we're willing to talk about anything up here. Anything. And I think about that when I think about the Song of Solomon. I mean, this guy's crazy. Fortunately for him, he had like 999 other wives, so if this one got mad, I mean, whatever. But anyways, I want to read you guys a passage from, I could talk about that for a long time. Song of Solomon 8, 5-7. The first verse, mostly I threw it in there for fun because it's crazy, but I'll read to you. Okay. Who is this coming up from the wilderness, leaning on her beloved? Under the apple tree I roused you. Now check this out. This is the friends talking. This is a text about their wedding day. This is the friends talking. This is what they say. There your mother conceived you. There she who was in labor gave you birth. If you get a best man that says part of his best man speech is going to be talking about how your parents gave birth to you and made you, get a new best man. That, like, nobody wants to hear about how, we all know where babies came from, except in our case, storks brought us, right? Because our parents didn't do that, and if they did, it was just that once, and that's how the rest of babies are made. So anyways, we'll read verses 6 and 7. These are the ones I really wanted to read. Place me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm, for love is as strong as death, its jealousy unyielding as the grave. It burns like blazing fire, like a mighty flame. Many waters cannot quench love. Rivers cannot sweep it away. If one were to give all the wealth of one's house for love, it would be utterly scorned. I love this idea of saying, place me like a seal on your heart, like a seal on your arm, saying, like, attach me, ingrain me into your life. It's kind of like modern day is like, tattoo me onto your arm, make a sleeve out of me, something permanent that even if you regret it one day or you're struggling with that idea one day, you're in it for the rest of your life. It says that love is as strong as death, which, is what it should be. Nothing should break this bond. True love should be broken by nothing. And that's why I say, love has emotions and feelings attached, and that's a really cool byproduct of love. But if you want to actually love someone, then unconditionally, unswervingly commit. That's what love actually is someone saying, I'm willing no matter what. Not just when I feel good, and not when emotions stir up or anything like that. Not because you're buying me gifts or you're doing nice things for me, make me smile, but because I'm committed to you no matter what in an unconditional way. 1 Corinthians 13 talks about how love always perseveres and it never fails. It perseveres when things are good, it perseveres when things are easy, but it always perseveres and it never fails, it never gives up. If you actually want to express love, then just say, I'm committed till death do us part. And there are other things that will come, but that's the bottom line. Grip 2.0 journals this week, you're going to be reading a passage from Matthew 19, and I want to look at a little excerpt from that. This passage talks about divorce a little bit. I just want to say really quickly, we're happy to talk about anything up here. I want you to know if you've been through a divorce or at any point, or you do go through one time, or you're going through one right now, when we talk about these things, we're not trying to make you feel uncomfortable, or we're not trying to make you feel judged or looked down upon. But we do believe in healthy, committed relationships. And so no matter what's in your past, that's not really what we're concerned with. We're concerned with where you're moving from here forward and where Jesus can take you. And so as we read this passage, I hope that you can just hear my heart in that. And if it does make you feel uncomfortable, then you can just take it up with Jesus, because it's his words. So some Pharisees came to him, Jesus, to test him. They asked, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any and every reason?" Jesus says, "Haven't you read that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female and said, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh." Check this out. He says, "Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate." Let no one separate a marriage. "Why then," they asked, "did Moses command that a man give his wife a certificate of divorce and send her away?" And check this out. Jesus says, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives. Why? Because your hearts were hard. Because you guys were failing and you were screwing up. So we made an exception for you guys. He says, but it was not this way from the beginning. This isn't the plan. This isn't how marriage should work. This wasn't his plan for marriage. He says, "I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another woman commits adultery." Jesus says, all those reasons that you have, he or she is annoying you. You know, they're causing financial issues. They did this, they said this. They're just not like they used to be. They've changed. He says, all those excuses aren't justified. He says, none of that matters. Jesus didn't go to the cross based on how we made him feel. He went to the cross based on the fact that he was committed to us. And a God that's that committed to us and cares for us calls us to say, and it says, take all those excuses, all those reasons you could possibly face, and throw them away and understand that I'm calling you to be unswervingly committed. These are heavy words, but from a God that cares for you and laid his life down for you, they start to make a lot of sense. And he gives us a cool example of what that kind of commitment looks like. So maybe this morning you're experiencing difficulties in your marriage. Maybe you have experienced a lot of difficulties in your marriage. And if you haven't, then I'm sure you will one day. It's a bit of a guarantee. There's really no magical formula. At FBC, we don't believe there's a magical formula. We don't believe you can just make problems go away. All there is the opportunity to hold onto that tube as tightly as you can, to say, I'm committed. I will never let go no matter what, because I follow a God who never lets go of me no matter what. And that's what true love really looks like. Let me pray for you guys. God, thank you so much that you're committed to us and you care about us, God. Pray that we would be a church that grows in the ways that we commit in our relational health and our marriages and our families, God, so that we could change the world around us and shine your love through the ways that we organize our families, God. You're amazing, and we just thank you so much. Amen. Have an awesome week, guys.